All right.
Hello and welcome to the PFF Q&A. I'm Doug Kide, joined by Ari Meirov. Ari, how are you doing today?
Doing well. We are missing our good friend Brad here this week, but that's
Yes.
fine. Well, we're gonna roll without him. But a lot going on in the NFL. Our first week of preseason is in the books, which obviously felt great. And it's only getting busier from here. We're under a month away from the season starting, which is just crazy already.
Yeah, it seemed like there was a lot more hype around the preseason games this week, which I think people missed football in general. Maybe they missed preseason games, but the biggest reason to me was just the rookie quarterbacks. Everyone wanted to see how these rookie quarterbacks were going to play in the first week of the preseason. So that's what we're going to kick off here with this Q&A. We're just going to talk about the rookie quarterbacks and their performance a little bit from week one of the preseason. Let's kick it off actually with Mac Jones, because he was the first quarterback to actually play, and he was the highest graded rookie quarterback on PFF from week one of the preseason. I would say that Mac Jones was solid, didn't make any serious wow plays. Maybe his best throw of that game against the Washington football team came on an incompletion to Christian Wilkerson, a Patriots wide receiver, that was kind of deflected away by a Washington football team defender. But otherwise, did what he was supposed to do, looked comfortable out there. And among these rookie quarterbacks, the guys who are in competitions, he seems to be in a pretty good place right now. Not sure if he's going to be the week one starter for the Patriots, but he's at least directly competing against Cam Newton in there.
Yeah, it was a small sample size, but I liked what I saw in that competition with Cam Newton. Is going to be a very intriguing one. For me, the thing that we saw out of Mac Jones, just the poise and the comfort level in that offense. You want to pass the eyeball test in the preseason. And for me, again, it was a small sample size, but it looked like he was used to it, like he's done it before. I liked how the Patriots kept the first team offensive line in there to start for him, which was actually kind of neat. But he ran the no huddle there with some confidence when they went to that a little bit in the second half. The moment didn't look too big for him. As you said, he should have had that long touchdown pass there in the back of the end zone. But, he played over 30 snaps. He got the ball out of his hand fairly quickly. And, for our first preseason game, I think he just passed the eyeball test is really what you're asking for. And we have 2 more games here left during the preseason. And that competition, Bill Belichick keeps on saying that Cam is going to be the starter. But I'm not really 100% buying that right now. I think we're really going to keep on seeing how both these quarterbacks do.
I think that the key there is that Bill Belichick is saying that Cam Newton is the starter. That doesn't necessarily mean that Cam Newton is going to be the starter. And there's a little bit of trickery with the language there for Bill Belichick that you have to watch for. The one big thing for that competition coming up here in the next few days and weeks. So the Patriots are currently having joint practices against the Eagles. Then they've got that preseason game against the Eagles. Then they've got joint practices with the Giants. Then that preseason game against the Giants. So there's a lot of competitive reps to go around for those 2 quarterbacks over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I think that that's really going to dictate who is playing in week one. I still maintain that, Cam Newton's probably the favorite to start in week one, but just the fact that the Patriots are putting Mac Jones out there, like you said, with the first team offensive line in practice against the first team defensive line shows that they are acknowledging this as a competition and not just that they are going to roll with Cam Newton as the starter. And that's a little bit different from what we're seeing with some of the other quarterbacks out there. So let's get to Trey Lance with the 49ers. He really has been taking second team reps behind Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco. So it really does look like it is Jimmy Garoppolo's job to lose during the season. I'll get a little bit of a better look at that competition this week because I'm heading out to the 49ers and Chargers joint practices. But I thought Trey Lance was good in that preseason game. Definitely ran a little bit hot and cold, though. Had better moments than Mac Jones, but probably wasn't as good overall.
Yeah, for me, he looked comfortable at times in the offense, which I think is important because we always hear about just how complex that Kyle Shanahan offense could be. And one of the things that the 49ers liked about Lance in that pre-draft process was the fact that Lance is able to pick up things fairly quickly. We all saw that big 80-yard touchdown to Trent Sherfield, which really, went viral. I think it had over like 3 million views on Twitter. But for the people who didn't watch the full game, he also took 4 sacks in that game. And he also had a couple of plays that came close opposed to being interceptions. So that's why, Kyle Shanahan after the game said, yeah, there were some goods in there, but there's a lot of bad as well in there in his first game. So again, similar to Mac Jones, we're going to see him 2 more times. He has the Chargers this week. You're going to be there to check it out. But when it comes to rookies, we know we're going to have those ups and we're going to have those downs. And when we look at a team like the 49ers, where we know they're going to be contending, especially if all their players are healthy, they want to have a quarterback there who is going to limit those downs. And that's why I really believe they're going to start off with Jimmy Garoppolo. It's why they've been saying they're going to have Jimmy Garoppolo as that starter, someone who can manage the game, someone who could limit those mistakes that we did see Trey Lance have in that game on Saturday. So as you said, he has been taking those second team reps for the most part. He has shown flashes, but there's still a lot of learning there for Trey Lance. Remember, this is a guy who did not play at all last year, right? He only played one game in college. So he's still in that learning curve right now with that offense. They're going to give him more reps here this week against the Chargers. But for now, this looks like it's going to be Jimmy's season to start. He's going to get the start here for the 49ers. We'll see how he does those first few games, but he's going to know that, Trey Lance is right there, right behind him, and the fans want him out there. The 49ers fans are dying to have him on the field. So Jimmy's going to have to perform over those first few weeks. And if he does, he's going to keep the job. But from there, Trey Lance could eventually take over because, again, Kyle Shanahan really fell in love with Trey Lance during the pre-draft process.
I think the path there that would probably be the smartest to take is following something similar to what the Chiefs did when they had Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, Alex Smith started during Patrick Mahomes' rookie season. Patrick Mahomes took over in year 2 and then obviously has ascended from there. So maybe we could be looking at something similar with the 49ers. And if Jimmy Garoppolo does not stay in 2022 and beyond, one team to look out for to acquire Jimmy Garoppolo, potentially the Houston Texans. I know that there's still a connection there between Nick Caserio, the Texans general manager, and Jimmy Garoppolo. Let's move over to another intriguing quarterback, Justin Fields with the Bears. The Bears actually just said today that they are going to start giving Justin Fields a little bit more time with Allen Robinson and that first team offense. So like I was saying earlier with Mac Jones and Cam Newton, there's still a decent amount of time this summer. We're less than a month away from the start of the season. But if you start seeing Justin Fields getting some more of those first team reps with or over Andy Dalton, you could potentially start to see a little bit of a shift there. Justin Fields, pretty similar to Trey Lance, had some very good moments in his preseason game, also had some rookie moments, had the fumble. So he's certainly not probably ready to start right now, but by the end of the summer, after 2 more preseason games, they could have confidence there. And this is a different situation with the 49ers where you've got Andy Dalton coming in. I think that Jimmy Garoppolo at this point, being on the 49ers, having been there for a while, winning with the 49ers, much more proven than what you've got in Andy Dalton coming in this season to be the Bears starter. So I think it's a lot easier to jump above Andy Dalton for Justin Fields than it would be at this point for Trey Lance to jump over Jimmy Garoppolo with the 49ers.
Yeah, for sure. And this is definitely an interesting situation because, you mentioned before the Patrick Mahomes, Alex Smith situation there. So in Kansas City. And, when you look back, Matt Nagy was the offensive coordinator there. And it was interesting because this morning in Peter King's Football Morning in America, he spoke to Matt Nagy and it was interesting to see what he said because, he's already seen that method with Mahomes and Alex Smith, right? And what caught my eye in that interview, which was very interesting to me, is that he said he's not going to do what's best for myself right now. We all know that Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace are on the hot seat there in Chicago. When ownership comes out and says, yeah, we're going to keep them for another year, that usually means you guys better perform right now. But he said he's not going to do what's best for me. I'm going to do what's best for Justin Fields for the next 15 years of his career. And, they have to win, they have to do all that, but it sounds like unless they are 100% sure that Field is ready to go out there, they are going to put Andy Dalton in. I really believe that because from all the rookie quarterbacks, no quarterback held the ball more in the first preseason game here in the first week of preseason than Justin Fields. He held the ball for, I believe it was 3.8 seconds. And, he has the ability to make those plays into some positives, but that could also turn into a mess, right? So Chicago wants to give him everything down, get to learn everything before throwing him into the game in week 1 with Aaron Donald running after you, right? So in a way, I see where you're coming from, Doug, but I also believe that there's a real chance here they're going to let Andy Dalton start, which is what they've been saying for a while now. And then eventually they're going to hand it over to Justin Fields, which is what, of course, their fans want, and they've been dying for. But you look at that game; he had a lot of ups there, but he had a couple of downs as well. I think they want to slow play this before throwing him out there and having him, with that offensive line, by the way, which is also a bit shaky right now. Right? They just signed Jason Peters, who's obviously up there in age. So I don't think they're going to throw him out there right away. I think we're going to see him sooner rather than later. But I think this is still Andy Dalton's job to start the year.
I think that that's probably the more likely situation. I certainly just think that Fields probably has a better chance to start earlier than Trey Lance at this point. Another quarterback who actually did get the ball out pretty quickly, rookie quarterback in the preseason, was Zach Wilson of the Jets. He really got the least amount of opportunities out of these top quarterbacks. He was only had 9 passing attempts, 9 of 6 for 63 yards, but he was also PFF's second highest graded passer among rookie quarterbacks in that first week of the preseason. Kind of tough for him, though, but without Elijah Moore out there, Jets didn't have their full arsenal of weapons. So I would say that, not a ton to glean from this performance from Zach Wilson, but clearly they like Zach Wilson a lot, and he will be their guy from week 1. They really don't have a safety net even behind Zach Wilson in New York.
Yeah, when I was watching Zach Wilson there on Saturday versus the Giants, he played a very conservative game, which I think was interesting. He didn't try to do too much. He threw the ball with plenty of zip. He had a nice ball there to Corey Davis. I'm actually kind of curious to hear from you, Doug. Like, what the Jet situation there with, James Morgan and Mike White as the backups, like, it feels like it's kind of odd to do that when Zach Wilson's going to be the starter. It feels like that is definitely a spot there where they could be looking for a veteran, possibly like a Nick Foles, who could be available there in Chicago, which we just mentioned. Could that be a spot where they need a veteran quarterback? Like, all 3 quarterbacks there on the roster right now have 0 career attempts in the regular season. So I think there in the Jets, we saw him play a little bit, didn't do too much, but he played a very conservative game, didn't make any mistakes, which is what you want to see, played with confidence, which was great. Again, we're going to see more of him here coming up this week, but I'm curious to see what the Jets do with that quarterback room, just because there isn't any experience at all there.
Yeah, and I mean, before Brian Hoyer re-signed with the Patriots, that there was some interest from the Jets there. So at least during one point of the offseason, they were interested in acquiring a veteran quarterback who could help groom Zach Wilson a little bit. So I agree with you. I think that Nick Foles would make a ton of sense there to go to the Jets, because Nick Foles is a guy who needs to get out of his current situation. Makes no sense for him to be the number 3 quarterback there. And yeah, the Jets certainly need a veteran backup behind Zach Wilson, and there's not a ton of options beyond Nick Foles. So that certainly seems to make a lot of sense. Nick Foles isn't a guy that would necessarily put undue pressure or too much pressure on Zach Wilson. But I think that would be a deal that would make sense a lot for both parties. Getting to the final top quarterback here, Trevor Lawrence, another one who had some wow throws from what I saw in that preseason game, but also another guy who was not perfect. This is kind of what we saw from all of the quarterbacks. No one was lighting it up 100% of the time out there. This is an interesting situation because the Jaguars have actually said that it's still a competition between Trevor Lawrence and Gardner Minshew. And I think it was Mike Flory of Pro Football Talk who was writing about this. It's curious why they're saying this. Maybe it's to drive up the price in a trade for Gardner Minshew. Maybe he's a guy who could go to the Jets to back up Zach Wilson, even though that's not exactly the best fit to be, to help groom a starting quarterback. But I don't know. It's interesting that the Jaguars are putting it out there that they're not just saying, yes, Trevor Lawrence is our guy. He's the week 1 starter, no matter what happens this summer.
Yeah, I found that to be odd and interesting. I think, like, everyone knows that Trevor Lawrence is going to be the week 1 starter. There has been a belief for a while that the Jaguars have been shopping Gardner Minshew and they haven't gotten any good offers. There's been a lot of talk that he's wearing Tim Tebow's number 15 and all this different stuff, which was funny. And they're trying to, move on from him. But yeah, I mean, this is Trevor Lawrence's job. He's going to be the week 1 starter. Gardner Minshew is either going to be the backup or they're going to trade him eventually to a team that does need a quarterback. But just going based off, what Trevor Lawrence did there on Saturday versus Cleveland, or was it Friday? I don't even remember already, but whatever it was, we all know that the talent that Lawrence possesses, there's a reason he was the number one pick locked in since he was a freshman at Clemson. The throws he did make, he looked like a natural, but, there's a bit of an issue there in Jacksonville with the protection. I mean, he fumbled once, he was sacked twice, he didn't have much time to do his thing. I think that's something that we're going to be watching very closely throughout the year here in Jacksonville with that new coaching staff there. They have Cam Robinson, who's on the franchise tag this year. So obviously he's going to be trying to play to get that big contract. But, it's the offensive line there has been very shaky. And that's something very concerning, especially for a quarterback like Lawrence, who isn't that big, quote unquote, when it comes to his weight, right? So you look at him in that sense. So you obviously don't want your franchise quarterback taking that much hits. And that was definitely one of the things that was concerning for me in that preseason game. But overall, like you said, the throws that he did make, there was a reason why all of us said he was number one overall pick since he was the freshman at Clemson. And we saw some of those throws against Cleveland. So as long as the protection is going to be there, we expect Trevor Lawrence to thrive in Jacksonville over Urban Meyer. But that protection is something that we're going to be keeping a very close eye on.
Definitely. And he was clearly the number one quarterback in an otherwise very talented quarterback class as well, which certainly says something to his potential. Let's move on to our next topic here, just off the front. Joe Schobert traded from the Jacksonville Jaguars to the Pittsburgh Steelers. This was, in my opinion, a very good trade for the Steelers. I mean, they reportedly got, or they got the Jaguars to actually pay for some of Schobert's salary. It was only for a late round pick. They had a need there as far as needing an inside linebacker who could help out a little bit in coverage. That's certainly what Joe Schobert can do. He's been a very talented player throughout his NFL career. So this just seems like Jaguars didn't really see him as a fit in the new regime, and the Steelers might have wound up getting a steal by having him just suddenly become available here in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, and shout out to Brad, who was on top of this when it happened on Thursday. But we knew the Steelers were looking for linebacker help, especially when Vince Williams retired abruptly on the eve of training camp. So the Jaguars, again, going back to that new coaching staff, they're running a similar defense to what Baltimore does there, where when it comes to linebackers, they usually don't pay their linebackers big time money. So that's what Joe Schobert was on, and they signed a guy like Damian Wilson in the offseason. He has been co-starting, is what they were listing with Joe Schobert. He's going to be the new starter there on the defense for Jacksonville, much cheaper as well. What I found interesting here is that Schobert, of course, already arrived in Pittsburgh, has been practicing, and he admitted already that the plan is for him to wear the helmet radio for the defense, and he's going to be the one who's calling the plays on the field this season. So he's going to have to learn this defense real quick if he's going to be the guy there. It was Devin Bush last year. He tore his ACL. He's coming back this year, but they're going to have Schobert be the leader of that defense there. And if Brad was here, I'm sure he could have broken down this contract a little bit, but the Jaguars are paying some of his contract for this year. I believe it's close to half of his deal, $3.6 million, the Jaguars will be paying. And then what also is interesting here is the Steelers gave up a 6th round pick. They now don't have a 4th round pick, a 5th round pick, or a 6th round pick in the 2022 draft. So it's another thing to keep in mind as well.
Certainly not a lot of those day 3 picks there for them. Let's skip around a little bit. Let's get into the Seattle situation right now with Jamal Adams. This is a tricky situation for Seattle after they gave up 2 first-round picks to acquire Jamal Adams, and now they're almost forced to figure out something monetarily for Jamal Adams moving forward. But it's also kind of a tricky situation for Jamal Adams because the Seahawks could franchise Jamal Adams for a couple of years. To me, that seems like the smarter move here for Seattle, to maybe give it one more year, see how Jamal Adams does this season, franchise him, then see if you can make something work moving forward. At the same time, from reports out there, it seems like Seattle and Jamal Adams are relatively close money-wise right now, but it's just a tricky situation where how much do you pay a safety who really excels as a linebacker and near the line of scrimmage as a pass rusher? There's not a lot of examples out there like what Jamal Adams and the Seahawks are dealing with right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I have a piece on this coming out later today explaining the entire situation, so be on the lookout for that. But you mentioned the franchise, route that the Seahawks could go on. The thing where it becomes tricky there is that we've already seen Jamal Adams, who could, be outspoken and start talking about the head coach, and do these interviews and blast Adam Gase the way he did. So you want to make sure it doesn't get to that point there. Right now, he's there at training camp. He had to report based off this new CBA, but he's holding in basically. He's there, but he's not doing anything. The belief around the league is that Adams doesn't want to be paid as a safety. He wants to be paid as a top defensive weapon, which, if you really look at the data, the PFF data, he's kind of right because he does really line up all over the field there for Seattle. Also, when it was the Jets, he's in the box, he plays corner, he played some defensive line as well, if you look at the numbers. So he really is all over the place. And again, as you mentioned, the Seahawks gave up 2 first-round picks and more to bring him to Seattle. And there's also a belief that they don't want to make him the highest paid defensive player on their team, which right now belongs to Bobby Wagner at 18 million. So it feels like 17.5 is like the sweet spot there, but then they're struggling to figure out the structure there with that contract when it comes to cash flow and guarantees. That's a different issue. I know there's a report out there from the Seattle Times that the Seahawks have made their final offer. I'm not 100% sure if that's true. It's worth mentioning that Adams has the same agent as Tre'Davious White. If you remember last year, they took that contract talks all the way until a few days before the season started. So they're comfortable waiting this out and stretching it out until right before week 1. I think you are right. They are close on the numbers. It comes with the structure and the guarantees, which is what they're holding up with right now. So if I was to guess right now, if I was a betting man, will this deal get done or not? I believe it will. I think it will take some more time, but they're pretty much almost there, but they're not there yet. That's basically where they are right now. So we'll see where this goes. We're going to monitor it very closely. That's for sure.
Yeah, and the Seahawks do have the leverage right now, or have some leverage with a franchise tag. And Pro Football Talk report today that Jamal Adams would ask to be franchised as a linebacker. Even then, I still feel like the Seahawks would have some leverage there, and then they could also dictate where he's playing during the 2021 season to determine how he would be franchised. If he's lining up more at safety than linebacker, then that would be a tough sell for Jamal Adams to say that he would need to be franchised as a linebacker. Let's just get really quickly into 2 more topics here. Number one, taunting has become, it seems like it could become a pretty major issue this season, where even the slightest celebration in the direction of the opposing team is going to be hit with a 15-yard penalty. And those could be game swinging penalties for something that a player has been allowed to do in the past. And it might be tough for them to just all of a sudden break that off and no longer, look at a player or flex or point or do something after a big play.
Yeah, I'm really hoping this will be just a preseason thing and the competition committee and the league and the PA could realize that literally nobody is happy about this right
Right.
now. Like, could you imagine, I don't know, Jarvis Landry in the 4th quarter of the Browns down by 3, making a big catch, getting the Browns at the field goal range. He flexes and now they have a penalty thrown. They're out of field goal range. Could you imagine that happening? I mean, I think everyone would go nuts. I mean, I remember when this news came out last week, I kind of got the sense that, there was an uptick in taunting last year. They probably don't want it to be that much, but they're not actually going to do this, right? And then to actually see it in action yesterday in that Colts-Panthers game, I mean, it blew me away. The amount of players that were in my mentions yesterday with Cameron Jordan and Tyler Lockett, all of them are upset and not happy about this. I mean, at the end of the day, this is football. You cannot make these guys into robots. There is emotion in this game. There's a lot of trash talking that goes on that we don't even get to see. I mean, there's a lot that's going on there on the field. Just expect these guys just to be normal and hug each other after every play or something like that. It's not going to happen. This is football. So we'll see what ends up happening here. We have a couple of more preseason games. I mean, if it keeps on happening, I think Twitter might crash, honestly. I mean, it's not great. But we'll see if they kind of backtrack on this a little bit. I mean, I understand the flagrant stuff being out of the game, but flexing after the running back carries 4 or 5 guys and gets a 15-yard game and then just flexes for a second and leaves. I mean, come on. We really cannot have that be a 15-yard penalty.
One last thing is just the Dak Prescott situation in Dallas. He reportedly will be back to throwing today, back to taking some practice reps in practice. That's after the Dallas Cowboys announced last week that he would be undergoing a second MRI. It does seem like that was just to check on how his shoulder is doing, but it's constantly it's a situation to monitor until Dak Prescott is back to taking as many reps as every other starting quarterback in the NFL. Because, and we were talking about backup quarterback situations earlier on the show, and they're not in a great situation either with Garrett Gilbert and Ben DiNucci behind Dak Prescott. They really didn't address that backup quarterback situation, despite the fact that Dak Prescott was coming off of the ankle injury. And now obviously he's got the shoulder to deal with as well. So they would be in major trouble if this issue persists even further for Dak Prescott. They've got about a month to figure it out. So certainly some time to get that shoulder back in working order. But just, I wouldn't say it's a concern, but definitely a situation to monitor there in Dallas.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, you mentioned the backup situation. Interesting that they attacked that last year with Andy Dalton, but then they kept it quiet this year with their quarterback coming back from a very serious injury. One of the things that was mentioned to me was that when you have a quarterback who had an ankle injury and he's been recovering from it for so long, his shoulder might not, he hasn't been doing that much on his shoulder because he's been recovering the ankle that much. And that's where the discomfort might have came from. And it's a good thing that Dak realized it and didn't just keep on going through it and as if nothing happened, and went to the medical staff and they said, hey, let's put a pause on this. I know Jay Glazer kind of reported this is more of a baseball injury. It's like under the armpit or something to that nature. So, listen, he's back in practice, which is definitely a good sign. Obviously, he'll be a limited participant there today, but being back at practice is a good sign. We still have some time until that Thursday opener against Tampa Bay, but it's 100% true that they're going to take this thing very slowly with their franchise quarterback, the quarterback who just got paid a massive contract, right? So they're going to take their time on this and slow play it. But based off everything you're hearing out of Dallas and all the local reports, it sounds like they don't believe it's something serious, and he will be ready for the regular season opener versus Tampa Bay. I know we had that MRI recently. I believe it was on Saturday. Everything came back clean, so it's trending in the right way, and it looks like he'll be ready for the regular season opener.
One other thing about quarterbacks is that everything is tied together. If the ankle's hurting and you're not able to put as much weight on that leg or that ankle, then you have to start throwing with your shoulder a little bit more. And some of these issues can pop up elsewhere if you're favoring a certain part of your body. So once that ankle is back to full working order, everything should be fine for Dak Prescott. But that will do it for this week's PFF Q&A. Thanks for joining Ari and I. And there's going to be roster cuts. The first wave of roster cuts, teams have to get from 90 players down to 85. Some teams have already started cutting players, but definitely make sure to follow Ari and I on Twitter. Ari is at My Sports Update. I'm at Doug Kyed, DOUGKYED. So definitely follow us and PFF for everything that's going to be coming this week as far as NFL news.